Andor Season 2 was received very, very positively by both critics and the audience. It changed the narrative for Star Wars and the landscape of Star Wars moving forward, especially because of what Andor Season 2 was. It was, I would say, 99% of the fandom thought it was absolutely phenomenal. And it brought new fans into what Star Wars is. So what Andor Season 2 has done is phenomenal. But there was still one main issue with Andor Season 2, despite how good it was. And that was the time jumps, the 1 year between each arcs, because it felt like it condensed the potential of Andor. Granted, it was still very good, but in today's video, I want to propose what Andor would look like in 3 seasons. They originally planned to do 5 seasons. It was not economically feasible at all for Disney or Lucasfilm to do that. So 3 seasons, give them 1 extra. But what would you do? You can't just start season 3 after season 2, because right after season 2 is Rogue One. So what do? You split the original season 2 across 2 seasons, and you expand and give more context to the incidents and stuff happening, grow the characters more, etc. So that's exactly what I've done, and I want to share that with you today. Season 1 takes place in BBY5. That remains exactly the same. And I've split the episodes into chapters as well, just to make it easier to follow along with. So chapter 1 consists of episodes 1 to 3, Casa, that would be me, and Reckoning. And that falls under the chapter name Andor. Pretty self-explanatory. Chapter 2 would be called The Mask of Fear and contains episodes 4 to 6, Aldani, The Axe Forgets, and The Eye. Then we get an interlude, because episode 7 announcement is kind of on its own. It does a good job at wrapping up what chapter 2 does and also sets up chapter 3. Speaking of chapter 3, it's called The Sunrise and contains episodes 8 to 10, Narkina 5, Nobody's Listening, and One Way Out. And then chapter 4 is called Fight the Empire, with Daughter of Ferrix and Rick's Road bringing up the rear. Season 1 remains unchanged. Move on to season 2, which takes place in BBY4. Now, season 2, instead of covering BBY4 to BBY1, is only going to cover BBY4 and BBY3. The first half of the season will be for BBY4, the second half of the season for BBY3. So, how do we start season 2? Well, chapter 5 is called Infinite Energy, because we obviously get a focus on the Infinite Energy program for Krennic. Remains exactly the same. Episodes 1, 2, 3, 1 year later, Sigourney Tima and Harvest remain exactly the same. It starts season 2 exactly the same. Then chapter 6 is called The Raid, and we get my new creation. So episode 4, Fogo Basta, episode 5, Avenger, and episode 6, This Is What It Takes. And this is my own creation. These storylines kind of flow on from the original chapter. So in this kind of chapter, we would get more on Dr. Gorst, because we do get an interesting exchange with Partagaz and Hirt and Jung in the ISB building about Dr. Gorst and how he's important to the Empire now. So let's see what he's doing. Let's see what he's up to. Let's see that transition into Coruscant, I suppose. We'd also get confirmation that Supervisor Blevin, who was from season 1, has been dismissed completely from the ISB, just wrapping up that loose end. We would also get an assassination plot on Luthen, and it would be Cinta who is tasked with protecting him outside of Coruscant. He's completely caught by a rebel group who Luthen promised safe passage through the core worlds to, but failed to deliver, and they want his head. So Cinta's tasked to protect, and this is how she ends up with her injuries, which set up her story for the next chapter in Gorman. We also get resolution with the TIE Avenger and what Cassian and Bixen will do, and we get more Saw Gerrera involvement as well with the Partisans, and kind of how Saw and Cassian will actually meet in this chapter. It's not, their first meeting was not in Rogue One, it was here. It was in this chapter. Now, some of you might be saying, oh, but they did meet in Rogue One. That was the first time they saw each other. There's no indication that that's true. First of all, Cassian probably knew Saw Gerrera just by his face, by his voice, by what he'd been told by the Rebel Alliance. But second thing, in Rogue One, the only exchange between those two is Saw telling Jyn to go with Cassian as Jedha's about to be destroyed. That's the only thing. So clearly there's some level of trust there. Potentially you could read it that way. So add some context, make Saw and Cassian kind of work together, begrudgingly of course, and let those two personalities conflict. Also, seeing Diego Luna and Forrest Whitaker together would be just fantastic. So I think that'd be interesting. We'd also follow Mon a bit in the aftermath of the wedding, and also what happens to Perrin and Lita, and kind of, yeah, how that kind of wraps up. Then we move to the second half of the season, where we would get Chapter 7, which would be The Gorman Front. Episodes 7, 8, 9, I've heard of Gorman, I have friends everywhere, and What a Festive Evening. These are the original episodes 4 to 6 of season 2, now moved to 7 to 9. Remains completely unchanged, everything happens exactly as it is. And this is the beginning of the Gorman stuff. Chapter 8, which is now my own creation, contains episodes 10, The Delegation, episode 11, Imperial Intelligence, and episode 12, Palmo Plaza. It follows Clea, continuing to look at listening devices. It would be one that she'd have to go after on Wabani at an Imperial labor camp, which, if you've watched Rogue One, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you know what character could feature, potentially. She would get Vel to go and do it, so that kind of incorporates Vel into the story, and see how she is after losing Cinta. We would also get some Grand Moff Tarkin and some Colonel Yularen, just kind of exerting their authority on the ISB. Lonnie would learn the secret meeting on the Malthane Divide from episode 1 with Krennic and Dedra and Partagaz. We would continue to get more Gorman. We'd follow our characters with Enza Rylands and Cara Rylands as they lead the Gorman front. We would see their attempted siege of the hotel at the center of Palmo, and this would inadvertently lead to the Empire closing off the plaza, as we see in the original episode 7 Messenger. Just adding some more context to that. Yes, the Empire did it probably for their own selfish reasons, but why not make it so that the Gorman front again stuffed up in what they were doing and inadvertently got the plaza closed. We'd also follow Cassian and Bix as they would go to Segra Milo and kind of learn more about Saw Gerrera's operations with the Partisans after their story with the TIE Avenger. This is a rebellion task. That's what they've been tasked to do. We would also get the introduction of a new group of rebels, another rebel cell called the Bellison Sectorists, who are a legit thing. I'm not making that up. And we would see them collide and clash in a turf war on Dakar. And that would leave the Partisans to remain on Dakar and continue building there. And the Bellisons would be forced to go to Dantooine, which is where the rebels were kind of forming before moving to Yavin. I think it's interesting to include more rebel cells and more rebel cells that Saw is clashing with, because remember, in his big speech in season 1, he said this:
Krieger's a separatist. Maipei's a neo-republican. The Gorman Front, the Partisan Alliance, sectorists, human cultists, galaxy partitionists, they're lost. All of them lost. I am the only one with clarity of purpose.
And what's interesting about that is we've seen more of these groups over the time. We saw the Gorman Front, we saw the Maipei Brigade. So why not incorporate more of them into what we're trying to tell? Show that the Rebel Alliance is growing, but it's still fractured. Now we move on to season 3, which takes the first half of the season takes place in BBY2, which is the Gorman stuff, and then the second half of the season is BBY1. So the start of season 3 would be my own creation. So episode 1 is called For the Greater Good, episode 2, Symbol of Hope, and episode 3, They Will Listen, under the chapter title Sectorists. We would follow Willman as he goes to Gorman as tasked by Luthen to kind of monitor the situation and watches the armories completed, and he also sees the arrival of Dedra Meero, which ultimately prompts him to come back to Yavin and tell Cassian about it. We see more of the planning of the Gorman front, but really it's kind of just the Imperial media is controlling the narrative, but also the Gorman front still wants to be active. You know, we think back to Cyril's line in one of the earlier episodes. He says they're inexperienced but eager. Yes, they are inexperienced, but they are eager to fight. They're eager to reclaim their planet from the Imperial control. Let's see that more. Speaking of Cyril, he's been pretty absent so far. He would get more of a role in this. He would kind of continue having drip-fed conversations between the ISB and the Gorman front, because they're still not trusting him, but they're also wanting more information, so it would be interesting to see how that goes. We'd get a lot on Coruscant, so Lonnie kind of continuing to assert himself, but also Partagaz is ramping up his demands because the ISB is crumbling, because there's pressure from outside sources like Krennic and Yularen, etc. In one of these episodes, Lonnie would steal or copy Dedra's code cert, because he mentions in episode 10 of the original season 2 that he has had Dedra's code cert for a year now. So we need to show that he takes that or gets that in some capacity. we also get more Dedra and Krennic, and seeing Dedra's move over to Gorman. We would also get some Mon and Bale, and kind of pushing back on the PORD, which I also think that the Empire would be pushing back on, because we got a discourse in season 2 that, you know, it clearly, they were arresting too many people, they weren't able to process them. So it would be kind of from both sides, but the Senate is just such in this dogmatic mindset now that they just cannot change it all. We would also get Luthen and Claire, and this is an important subplot, organizing a supply run to Yavin because the rebellion's starting to build there. But it goes poorly, and this is why a lot of the rebels perceive Luthen as not very good or look down on him, because he's supposed to be this big organizer who has everything under control and isn't able to fulfill his promise of getting supplies to Yavin. So just adding more context, it really is important. Cassian and Bix, I'm trying to get them to spend as much time as possible, so it makes her leaving at the end significantly more impactful. But they would also be joined by Vel, and it shows Cassian and Vel kind of reuniting, I suppose, because we haven't seen them together since. And they would be kind of charting the Yavin base and starting to plot things. It would also be revealed, because I know this was a big gripe for Jack from the first 2 episodes, is that we never found out what happened to the rest of the Maya Pay Brigade on Yavin. We would find out that they all died of malnutrition. So yeah, that's a fun little thing that you might be interested in. Then we get to chapter 10, which is the last, which is episodes 4, 5, and 6. The chapter is called The Galaxy is Watching, and we get Messenger, Who Are You, and Welcome to the Rebellion, which were the original episodes 7 to 9 of season 2, now episodes 4 to 6 of season 3. Remains completely the same. Let's get to the mid-season on a high, because we know that's good. Then the second half of the season takes place in BBY 1. Chapter 11 is called Frontier of the Rebellion. This is my last contribution to the new format. Episode 7 is called The Holy City. Episode 8 is called What Are We Doing Here? Episode 9 is The Defector. Now, this is a very important arc, and this was the first thing that I thought of fresh off of Andor Season 2. So, first thing, we would be getting some of our Rogue One characters in this arc. We would look at the Empire's mining in Jeddah City for kyber crystals. We would see the partisans locating to Jeddah and attacking shipments leaving the temple and stealing the kyber. We would see the impacts on Chirrut and Baze as Guardians of the Wills. And also we would see the Imperial cover up for their search for kyber as their plan to actually root out the partisans. That's what they're disguising it as, so to see it from the Empire's perspective as well. We would also see Cassian and K2, get him in here more, and Vel and Melshi help the Bellasan partitionists or the sectorists, or whatever they were called, get out of Dantooine and across the Yavin. They're a big group. They're a big group of rebels. They just don't have a lot of guidance, I suppose. So bring that big group from Dantooine across, and that obviously sets up Dantooine. We get more Dantooine. We get more context to what happens in A New Hope with Leia, etc. This is my favorite part, actually. We would get some plot details on Lothal, and we'd actually be getting Captain Legret, who is an ISB agent, and he goes to Lothal with a tactical team to incinerate a suspected rebel cell, and this leads directly into an episode of Rebels, which I think is exciting. So yeah, why not add more context to that? Coruscant, we would get Lonnie hacking into the account and Dedra's account, finding about the Death Star. This would kind of be the tension building section of the episode. Dedra would go and, scavenge, I suppose, for the information about Jeddah and Galen Erso and Gorman and everything, and continue our search for access without Hit knowing. And we see her planning the raid, making the teams tactical, and then tactical talking to Lonnie about it. And then we would also get kind of loose ends wrapped up surrounding Davos Skeldon and Perrin and Lita, and how Perrin ends up with Skeldon's wife. I think that's an interesting thing. So yeah, that would all happen. We would also get the most important part of this arc, Edu. We would get Galen Erso and Bodhi Rook, and Galen Erso kind of encouraging Bodhi to defect and deliver the message to Saw Gerrera. We would also see more Krennic and him actually making trips to Edu as well. Then chapter 12, to wrap it all up, is called Make It Worth It, and contains the original episodes 10 to 12, Make It Stop, Who Else Knows, and Jedi Kyber Urso of season 2 and make it the end of season 3. So it all links together, it all flows. And with that, we have Andor in 3 seasons. I think it's a fantastic idea. It doesn't have to go too overboard, so they don't have to keep coming up with ideas on what to do. It just makes it flow, keeps it interesting, adds context, adds importance, makes the stakes real, makes us really care for these characters more. And I think it does a fantastic job. So I've had a lot of fun making this. I think splitting it into chapters also helps just segregate it a bit more and makes it more easy to follow along with. But yeah, I had a lot of fun making this. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. This is my last video for a while, which is a shame, but you'll be in good hands with Jack. And I'm sure that I will see you very, very soon. Thank you for the support. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you later.